All right, so we're starting a brand new packet. This is actually our last trig packet. So after this one, we're going to go back to the book. But this one, we're going to use a calculator sum. So hopefully you got one from me before I left, or maybe Miss Higdon gave you one, I'm not sure. But you do need a graphing calculator to do this assignment, and preferably a TI-84 because that's the directions that I'm given. So this packet starts off talking about the unit circle, but then we don't really do much with it. The unit circle is a circle that the radius is 1 unit. And so basically it just tells you that for using the unit circle where r is 1, if we want to find the sine of an angle using the unit circle, we don't have to do y divided by r because r is 1. We would just use whatever that y coordinate was. And then if we were doing the cosine, same thing, because r is 1, we don't have to do x divided by 1. We would just use the x coordinates. So we'll come back to the unit circle later, but it just kind of throws that in there for not really sure why, but that's okay. But what we are going to be doing is finding trig ratios using the calculator. And some are extremely obvious what to do, and then we will get to some that are complicated, a lot more complicated. So anyway, the sine is pretty straightforward. The sine of 29 degrees is where we're going to start. Now, what is super important is that we are in the correct mode. So the mode that we want to be in for 29 degrees is degree mode. So what you do is just hit the mode button. The default mode is radian. So we're going to change this to degrees and then do second mode to quit. And then all we really have to do is do sine 29. We don't even have to close the parentheses, and that's it. And we're going to go ahead and round to 4 decimal places here. All right, it's that easy to find the sine. All right, then cosine of 131 degrees is just as simple. All right, what is different about the next one? This one is definitely in radians. Now, I'm not going to change it to degrees. That would be more work than I need to do. All I have to do in my calculator is go to mode again, change this to radians, and then second mode to quit, and then we just type it in like it looks. Now, if you notice, there's a little blue pie above this little symbol. So to get the blue buttons, you hit second blue button, and then divide it, divided by 8. The next ones are just as straightforward. We just have them as a decimal, but that doesn't really change much. But you do have to be really careful because we just did an angle that was in radians. So our calculator is in radians. So let's make sure we changed it back to degrees. And then we just type it in like it looks. All right, the next example starts talking about degrees, minutes, seconds. And so in geometry, you might have learned this. I'm not really sure, but degrees and minutes is just another way to represent a portion of an angle. So one angle or 1 degrees is super, super small, and it's divided into 60 equal segments that make up 1 minute. So they're super, super small. And then each little minute is divided into 60 equal seconds that are crazy small. So it's just another way to get a really accurate measurement, I guess. So for seconds, you're going to do alpha plus in the calculator. And seconds is like that. And then for degrees and minutes, you're going to do seconds, apps. I don't know why seconds is not there, but it isn't. So that's going to give you degrees and minutes. Okay, so we want to be in degrees because this angle is in degrees. So that you would read that angle 82 degrees, 12 minutes. So we want to find the sine of 82. Right, and then to get degrees, we're going to do second and then apps because it says angle right above there. It gives us some angle things. And degrees is number 1. And then 12. And then second, apps. And then minutes is number 2. And we just write down our decimal. Okay, same thing on this one. Cosine, 126 degrees. So second, apps, degrees. 42, second, apps, minutes. And then 53 seconds. So seconds is a different one. We have to do alpha plus to get seconds. So alpha plus, whoops. Oh, there it is. Sorry. It's because if you look at the plus sign, there's a little green second sign above there. All right. Okay. And one more. All right, keep on going. All right, so the reciprocal functions are going to be more challenging because there, if you look, there is not a cosecant, secant, or cotangent button. And then some people think that this blue sign to the -1 would be cosecant, but it isn't. That's the inverse sign. So you use that button when you're trying to find the angle, which we are going to do in a second. But if we actually just want to find the cosecant of an angle, what we're going to do is 1 divided by the sine of that angle. Now, I want you to write that down because we are going to practice this today and then take a quiz over it later, but we won't practice finding the cosecant very often. And if you don't write it down, you're probably going to forget. So as long as our calculator is in degrees, we actually don't have to do the degree symbol. We can just do 1 divided by sine. Oops. 1 divided by sine of 81. And that's going to give you the cosecant. All right, for secant, we're going to do 1 divided by cosine of 122. And cotangent, 1 divided by tangent. right, you guys try those on your own and then check with my answers in just a second. And pause the video if you need more time. All right, on F, pause if you haven't done F yet, but on F, when you go to do this, your calculator doesn't understand because you cannot skip minutes. If you have seconds, you have to have minutes. So I'm going to go in here and insert 0 minutes. And then the calculator will know what to do. So it was 1 over sine of 149 degrees, 0 minutes, 50 seconds. Okay, so there are going to be times in this packet where we want to reverse the process. So we know what the sine of an angle is, and we want to figure out what angle gives us that sine. And so we use the inverse trig functions. So on example 5, that's 5, 6, 7, and 8. That is what we're going to do. So we know that the sine of some angle is this decimal. We want to figure out what that angle is, and we want our answer in degrees. So as long as our calculator is in degree mode, it will give you an angle in degrees, right? And so what we'll do to get the inverse sine, you hit second and then sine. And then you just put in the decimal. So the angle that gives you that sine is the angle 65.5 degrees. Let's do 65.49. So on these, when we're looking for these angles, let's just round to 2 decimal places. All right, this arc cosine is just another way to say the inverse cosine. So arc cosine means the same thing as that. Arc sine is the same as sine to the -1. Arc tangent is the same as tangent to the -1. They all mean the inverse trig functions. Okay, and then on example 6, same thing, except after we get the angle, we're going to change it to degrees, minutes, seconds. So the arc tangent means the inverse tangent. So we want to figure out what angle has a tangent that's equal to 4.002. And that is the angle in decimal degrees. And if we want to change that to degrees, minutes, seconds, we do second, apps, and then choose number 4. All right, so that is 75 degrees, 58 minutes, and then we'll just round that to 14 seconds. Oh, sorry, I can't see it. All right, so let's write down those steps so you'll know how to do it next time. So to get degrees, minutes, seconds, we do second, app, so go to that angle menu, and then we choose number 4, DMS. Okay, we'll do the same thing on B, the inverse sine of that decimal. It's a really small angle, that's okay. And then second apps, What happened? Let's try it. There we go. Now we could write 0 minutes if we wanted to, 60 degrees, 0 minutes, but I'm going to skip it and just go to the seconds. All right. Now, doing the inverse trig ratio for the reciprocal functions is way more difficult to remember what to do. So it's kind of complicated. So what we do is whatever, like if this is secant, its reciprocal is the cosine. So we do the inverse cosine, and then we do 1 over 1.76. Okay, so it's the reciprocal of this, and then you do the inverse cosine. So write that down. I promise you, you are not going to remember that. We won't practice that again after today. So write it down. Okay, so when I want to do the arc cosine, cotangent, sorry, we would do the inverse tangent and then 1 over that decimal. Write it down. The reason you do it that way is because we want the angle that has a cotangent of this. So that would mean that it would have a tangent of that reciprocal. So that's just how you tell your calculator how to do it. All right, if we want the inverse cosecant, we're going to do the inverse sine of the reciprocal. Oops, I didn't do reciprocal. Okay, and then these are the same, except in the end we have to do degrees, minutes, seconds. So see if you can do them on your own. You can pause the video if you want to, or just try to not look up at what I'm doing and just do it yourself. Oh, I did something wrong. I forgot the decimal. Now that's the bad thing about the calculator is I only knew I did that wrong because I had the answer right beside me. So you you can kind of feel like you're going to trust yourself that you typed it in right. So you just have to be really careful and just take your time. Now, if you didn't get those answers, you can rewind the video and see how I typed it just to make sure that you did it right, or scroll back up on your calculator and see if you just did something like I did and just forgot a decimal, or if you like actually made it a mistake. Now, sometimes if you do it wrong, you get an error. It'll be like a syntax error or something, and that's good because that'll tell you you typed something wrong. But sometimes you do it wrong, like I did, and you just get an answer. You just write it down, and it's the wrong answer. So you have to be diligent. I am going to post the answers. Obviously, I don't want you to just copy them because if you don't practice this, there's like 6 questions on the test. Just typing things in the calculator. So you want to practice this. Okay, so your assignment is this number 1 right here. Be really careful. On here, we have our angles are in degrees, 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 and then all of a sudden, you notice there's not a degree symbol. So this one's in radians. But then when you get back up here, we are looking for angles, and it tells you to assume that we want decimal degrees. So these answers are all going to be in degrees unless it tells you otherwise, and it doesn't. These are all degrees. Some of these, they want degrees, minutes, seconds. We'll have this DMS. So that's what that means. So good luck. Practice, practice, practice with the calculator. You're going to need it to do the rest of this packet.